Hi, Spencer. Welcome to Awaken and Align. It's so great to have you.
Hey, thank you, Laura. I appreciate it.
For our listeners, I just wanted to introduce Spencer really quickly and how I found you. So, I was really into studying astrology in 2020, and I found your YouTube channel, and I just really resonated with your work and how you presented it, and all of the mythology and historical context that you brought to astrology, which I really learned that way. So, I got a reading from Spencer recently, and it just really helped me to confirm what I had already known deep inside. But obviously, we like when other people tell you, like, you're on the right path. And I asked Spencer to be on here just to share his story and his beautiful gift that he brings to all of us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Laura. I appreciate it.
So let's start with your origin story, and you could take this as far back as you feel called to. Where were you born? What did you want to be when you grew up? Really, you could take it anywhere.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I have a. Oh man, how far back do we go here? Uh, yeah, I started off wanting to be. I told my dad when I was 11 years old that I was going to write a book on philosophy. So there were some thoughts that were percolating behind the scenes of my subconscious from a very young age. But I grew up actually playing a lot of sports, so I kind of was going down that path as well. But eventually, I found music, and I started off as a music lover and an artist, and I got a guitar when I was 14 years old and started playing music and um, was a professional musician for a long time. I did professional music for about 20 years, and I was a teacher of music and did performing. And I really was inspired by an artist named Jeff Buckley. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff Buckley, but one of my favorites. I used to do tribute shows for him in various locations and whatnot. Um, and then I'd always been really interested in astrology and mythology. In college, I was introduced by a teacher, a creative writing teacher of mine, to Joseph Campbell and the power of myth.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, that led to studying Carl Jung and things like that, and the power of the collective unconscious, and all of these stories that helped us to find meaning. So that's something I've been really, passionate about since very early on in my education. Um, I had a girlfriend in college who introduced me both to Jeff Buckley, but also to astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a very, it was all wrapped up in these emotions of like a first love type of thing. And, just started studying things from like tarot.com. And she gave me the book Linda Goodman's Love Signs, which was a lot of people's first astrology book. And then another friend gave me the only astrology book you'll ever need, which is not true. Many, many books later. Um, but yeah, I sort of went on just with studying myth and symbol for a number of years while I was doing music and teaching music and parenting. I have a daughter as well, so that I was trying to balance out all of those types of things. And yeah, in 2017 though, uh, I was gifted a book uh, called Astrology and the Authentic Self by Demetra George. And after studying modern astrology and all of those things for 20 years or so, I was first introduced to traditional astrology, which is very different and has a lot of different systems involved. And I think at that point, I was like, oh, wow, this is a completely different um, entry point to these oracular divinatory systems, and it just changed my life. And I just became completely obsessed at that point. I would say that I was a very interested amateur up till that point, but then I was like, you know what? Um, I'd started. It wasn't that I was souring on music. It's just that I was in the music business for a little while, and it didn't. It wasn't everything that I hoped it was when I was a young dreamer. It was I was feeling some disappointment in that area of life, and just threw myself 100% into studying astrology and ancient philosophy and wisdom traditions. started listening to Chris Brennan's podcast, the Astrology podcast. And through that, I got introduced to this whole new world that I really didn't know existed, through things like Project Hindsight, and through all these ancient authors. Eventually, I got hooked up with a gentleman named Adam Ellenboss, who now goes by the name Acyuta-Bhava Dasa of Nightlight Astrology. He really resonated with me as far as his teaching style, so I started studying with him. And then I went to one pivotal moment was going to this astrology conference in Chicago in 2018 called the United Astrology Conference, also known as UAC. And I got a full ride scholarship from the astrological AFAN, the Astrological Federation of, oh man, I don't know what the acronym it is, but it's a networking organization. The Association for Astrological Networking, I think that's what it is.
Mhm.
And I got to meet all of these astrologers and all of these really wonderful, interesting people. And that was kind of my entry point into this world. And I started a YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology. I've just been collecting books and reading, and I'm just an eternal student. And I really love to read and then help guide other people towards some of this information and this wisdom to help them. The word we've been talking about is self-actualization, and that's something I really take seriously. And I think everybody has kind of a heroic story and narrative, and if I can help guide them to finding peace with whatever their story is, that's something that I really enjoy doing.
Wow, you said so much in there, but the first question that came up as you were speaking was, how did you know, like, what was the feeling or what was the environmental trigger that led you to know that music wasn't something that you wanted to put your energy into anymore and astrology was? Because I think sometimes for people, they don't they don't know, like, and for me as well, it's hard to discern when to keep doing something and like when, like nine of wands, like when to keep persevering
Yeah,
versus like, okay, the universe is not supporting me in this way, so how, like, I'll just let that
yeah.
go and keep going with something else.
It was hard. I admit. I love music, and I still think of myself as an artist as well. But um, yeah, I think that what I was experiencing at that period of time was I was teaching a songwriting class and I was teaching guitar classes, and I was doing this storytelling work within those classes, but having it be under the guise of music, right? Of saying, okay, I'm trying to teach life lessons through musicianship. But I realized that I was starting to dissuade the young people in my classes from getting involved in the music business because I was like, oh, this is a hard business. Be careful, And I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the old grizzled, bitter musician that sort of had some success, but sort of had some disappointments as well. Um, and also, I think I was really, to be honest with you, it was difficult for me to put in energy towards traveling, and which is somewhat of a big requirement for to be a successful musician, is going around and touring and doing those things. And I was just doubling down with my commitment to my daughter and being a parent, and the lifestyle associated with being an astrologer was much more conducive to me being a parent. Um, and I think that was something that was a really big part of my decision as well. Plus, I really love being of service, and I have a little bit of discomfort sometimes where with it being all about me, and that's something that I'm trying to still come to terms with. I think we all are on some level, but I think that I really enjoyed guiding people and living in what I like to call oracular space, which is that kind of liminal in between space between like the archetypal metaphorical world and this physical reality that we live within. And I'd always had a dream too of being like a philosopher or someone of that nature. I wanted to go to the Pacifica Graduate Institute when I was in college for my master's degree. I have a degree in creative writing, but I started a degree in comparative religion, and then music took over. But Pacifica at the time was really expensive. It's like back in the day, it was $40,000-$50,000 a year to do it, and you had to like fly out there and stuff like that. But I feel like I'm getting a similar education now in my 40s that I did back when I was 20. So I don't know. I just really like sharing this wisdom and this knowledge and teaching, and uh, I really enjoy continuing my own expansion through that as well. I think that one of the things that I really take seriously is that when I take in information, and you can see if I don't this, I think this is audio only, but if you could see a video, you'd see stacks of books surrounding me, and I feel like when I take in that knowledge, it's really important for me to give it back and to share it, because I think that one of the laws of nature and the universe is when you take in energy, you can't hoard it. If you keep sharing it and keeping the flow going, you'll become an open channel for that wisdom rather than an ending point.
Yeah.
So I think I think that's one of the things. Yeah, I don't know. I just met so many amazing people at the United Astrology Conference as well, that I felt like I had started meeting people that I really resonated with, that I could speak a shared language with as well.
Mhm.
And that was a really powerful experience.
I am so curious because, and I shared a little bit about this when we met for my reading. I'm just so curious as to how you are a cishet white man from Middle America, and maybe this isn't a part of your experience at all, but I find that um, this group of this group of the population does not believe in astrology, does not believe in like the metaphysical and divination. And how did you like I we know how you got into it, but how were you comfortable with it? Did you work on your own feminine, your own anima? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that there's a number of different reasons why I may have gravitated towards this field. I'm a Cancer sun, so I think that automatically there's a little bit of a more feminine kind of approach to life, having that sun sign. Um, I'm also a 12th house sun in Mercury, like with a Leo ascendant. So I think that having, you know, those placements in my chart is something that where I'm just marinating in metaphor all day long. It's not like I just like see things every once in a while. It's like I can't escape it. My brain just works in that way.
Mhm.
Um, and I have the moon in Taurus, so this is something where the moon is very strongly placed in my chart, and the moon also being kind of a symbol of the sacred feminine and the intuition. Um, but I think that my family was very open minded. I think that I came from a family of professors.
Mhm.
Um, my grandfather was a professor at Purdue University, and he was one of the first people to really advocate for conservation in America, for protecting the earth and things like that. He, I can't say enough about him. His name's Howard Michaud. He got a lifetime achievement award from Al Gore at the White House
Wow.
for conservation. So
Wow.
I should speak more about him because he's a really amazing person. And my great grandma was an elementary school teacher, and I think everybody in my family was really, um, they really appreciated service and being open minded. And I have my partner is African American, and a lot of talks that she and I have together are have really opened my eyes to maybe any blind spots that I might have around my sense of privilege and things like that. I think that even when we're conscious of some of these things, we can still have some blind spots.
Mhm.
Um, but I'll tell you what, just being someone who was a really sensitive little boy, I could really, could just feel when people were suffering and in pain, And I think that I've always wanted to alleviate that suffering. Um, it's just been something that I've always felt as a individual. I also my childhood wasn't all roses either. My parents were divorced, and I had 5 different step parents growing up. A lot of turnover in my young life, so I had to learn to adjust to a lot of different circumstances and people and environments. And I've lived in a lot of different diverse areas, and I think all of those have gone into informing being a person that I hopefully comes from a place of empathy.
I'm speechless because when you said Cancer Sun, Taurus Moon, no wonder why you want to help people grow, because those are such growth signs in such like a nurturing, grounded way. It's like such a nice energy. It's obviously not an energy that I that I personally carry in my chart, but something that like with the Taurus North Node is something that I'm trying to cultivate more of. So, wow, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So let's talk about your work. How did you get, okay, so you got into astrology, you got really into it, but then how did you start adding tarot and your other forms of divination?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you start studying wisdom traditions or anything really. If you have an inquisitive nature, when you answer one question, it will lead to 10 more. And I'm the type of person, when I read a book, I don't just read a book. I'll go back into the end of the book and the what do they call that? The bibliography in the back, and I'll look at all the sources that that author drew upon, and I'll go and I'll buy those books because believe in tracing these lineages back to seminal sources, right? Where we can see how that person and that author came to that um, position that they were in. And a lot of it is based on the culture and the time that they came from. And I think it's really important when we're studying things like ancient astrology or things like that to understand where in time and place that that information came from as well. And then when we know that, we can understand what we need to keep from that era and what we need to discard or maybe update for a more modern approach that may be more based on equality or based on new realizations that we've had as a human species or things of that nature. So I think that grounding it in the time and the place is really important. Um, I started studying the Decans when I got a book from Austin Coppock called 36 Faces, which I believe is a very difficult book to find these
Yeah,
days. It's
I
out of
can't find
print.
it anywhere.
Yeah. So I was very lucky to be able to acquire a copy of that right as they were kind of running out. I think he found a extra box of them in his garage, and I was like, oh, I gotta order this. So I'm very fortunate to have received that information. And he talks a lot about the tarot and the relationship between each 10-degree section of the zodiac and the minor arcana of the Rider Waite tarot. And that was adding specificity to my astrological studies, and it brings in a lot more myth, it brings in a lot more story, it brings in a visual way of thinking of your natal chart so that you have a story that you can draw upon to find strength within. And then as I was incorporating that, I was like, well, this tarot is its own unique divinatory system, and I probably should understand this in depth as well. So I've been kind of going down these rabbit holes with tarot recently, and especially incorporating the Kabbalistic tree of life within my understanding of the tarot. There's a couple authors that I really like. T. Susan Chang from Fortune's Wheelhouse is a wonderful author. I just got this book, Tarot and the Gates of Light from Mark Horn. And in that book, he talks about this. It's this exercise of doing this 49-day exercise called counting the Omer, where it is a an exercise where you're comparing two different tarot cards each day and getting in touch with the spiritual energies related to the exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt. So it's a meditation on release from slavery,
Mhm.
and it was really fascinating just like getting to know the Sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life, and we're talking about kind of hermetic
Mhm.
Kabbalistic experiences rather than the traditional uh, Jewish approach to it. Um, because in traditional Judaism, you wouldn't necessarily have a an image of the divine. That's kind of not allowed in that tradition. But in the Hermetic tradition, they have this tree of life and these Kabbalistic sephira, which are sort of like chakra energy centers. They're ways of thinking about different spiritual archetypes. So, like for example, in there are three pillars in this Kabbalistic tree of life. You have a right and a left pillar and a center pillar, and you're trying to balance out these two energies with the center.
Mhm.
And so what I will do sometimes now is I will meditate on what type of energy someone's specific planet
Mhm.
in a specific decan and how that relates to the Kabbalistic tree of life. So like we were talking about your chart, right?
Mhm.
You have a I can share some of your
Yeah,
chart placements. I always want to ask permission because it's something that's
I
very
know.
sacred.
I'm not Scorpio, so.
Okay. So, like for example, we have your Venus is in the second decan of Aquarius, and that is related to the Sephira called Tiferet, and Tiferet is the heart of the Kabbalistic tree. So there may be a desire of creating unity and balance of thought because it is in the world of Yetzirah, which is related to air and to the thought forms that we have. So there is this communication. So you may have an ability, like with Venus, of bringing things together into harmony of thought forms from many different types of experiences. Yeah, the second decan of Aquarius is related to the Six of Swords card in the Rider Waite Tarot, and in that card, you see a figure ferrying a mother and a child across a river from one place to another. So this is about being sort of between worlds and communicating with both the center and with people on the fringe or who are in exile. And that may be something that you have as a specific gift that we see you playing out in your podcast here, since it's placed in the third house of communication. You're going into these different areas of life and communicating and drawing on all these different experiences and bringing it into to harmony.
Okay, so when Spencer told me this, I almost wanted to cry in my own Aries way because I always felt like I don't know if you've ever watched Homeland, but the main character in Homeland kind of had this mental disorder, but it was like her genius too, because she could like see things and have all of this information that other people couldn't see. And I call it my Aquarian multiple tabs open kind of thing, where I'm thinking about something, but incorporating different epistemologies and thought forms and religions and everything, even quoting like Disney movies. And I always thought there was like something wrong, but there isn't something wrong. That's just how I metabolize information. And so when you said that, it just made me feel like seen.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I mean, that's really the beauty of studying astrology and getting a reading is a lot of these things we feel intuitively, and we so when you go to a reader or when you go to a tarot reader or you go to an astrologer, a lot of what you're getting is confirmation on things that you know, and
Mhm.
that's really valuable because a lot of the times what we experience is this the pain that we experience and the suffering comes from the self-doubt when we know something, that we have a truth inside of us, but getting confirmation from an external source is important, because that can show us that it's not like, oh, we're not crazy, or we're not like, this isn't just some random thing. There's actually a divine order to those feelings that you have, and that you're fitting in with something that may even be preordained at your birth, which is really a powerful thing. And it's a powerful thing to learn to understand ourselves, and to be able to use the energies that we are tapping into through our birth chart, to be able to, stop beating ourselves up and stop fighting against the currents of our life. And I've been using this new kind of tagline lately, to make friends with fate, right? To make fate your friend.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times we just fight against things in our life that come up. And uh, that's one of the big questions of astrology, and any of these divination systems: fate versus free will. And it's both. I think there are some things in life that we can't avoid, that are preordained, but there's also the gift of foresight, that when we understand what types of experiences we may run across, we can make a better choice in the moment, to be able to utilize all of our best potential with that circumstance that we're given. There's many different types of fate. There's one type of fate called hemarmene, which is sort of the body that you're born into, the family that you're born into, and we don't have a lot of control over that, right? And there's another called pronoia, which is that's the sort of the fate that we create through our foreknowledge. And what we're trying to avoid is ananke, which is the fate that we experience through our ignorance. So if we avoid ananke, we can utilize our pronoia to maybe, uh, I don't know, get to a better place. I think that's really the long and the short of it. Um, but also, the beauty of astrology, I think, is that when you understand the cycle that you are currently in,
Mhm.
and the places that you've been in the past, that
Mhm.
can bring you to a point of peace with the present. It can give you hope for your future. It can help you to understand um, that you may not even have to take an action in this moment. That's one of the things I like about studying the I-Ching as well. That's another divinatory system that has really resonated with me. I really enjoy Taoist philosophy. And one of the things I've learned from studying the I Ching is not every time period requires externalized action. Sometimes there is time where yin is important, where we're gathering strength for the next move, or where we're processing the old cycle. And it can be so liberating to feel like, oh, we're right on track. Like, we don't have to be necessarily forcing our agenda on life right now. Because I think, especially in Western civilization and late stage capitalism, we get this kind of thing where we always feel like we need to be doing something. We always need to be posting, or we always need to be grinding.
Yes.
And sometimes we forget that we can just be. And that's something that we've been missing, I think, in recent times.
Everything that you just shared was like almost parallel to this Chinese astrologer that I just interviewed. And they shared very similar very similar things with what you shared about the Kabbalistic tree of life, and how even in Chinese astrology, they have like three pillars where the first one is like you're born into your family and your family name. That's not
Mhm.
something you can change. And then the second one, and I forget the Chinese words for it, is your free will. Like, what are you going to do with that? And how do you change your life? And also, it reminded me of the water tiger, which we are in now, and
Yeah.
it's all about intentional action and really long periods of rest.
Mm.
Because a tiger is different than other apex animals where it's solitary, it hunts at nighttime by itself, but then it'll take like a 20-hour nap.
Sure.
So it like reserves its energy and then like goes full force when it's like hunting, when it's on the prowl. So I think what you were saying too is a reminder for these times when we are kind of in an ebb, to remind ourselves to just rest and to conserve energy. I say that, but I still have to embody that.
It's hard, isn't it? It really is hard because
Yeah.
sometimes you feel if when we take a time out that we're missing out. We get FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And we have to overcome a lot of, I think, guilt too. I think that there's a lot of guilt and shame that's been cast upon us, um, just from the way that society is structured. And I was thinking about this in America in particular. I have a lot of international friends. I really enjoy hearing about other cultures and the way that people are living in other countries. And on my YouTube channel, there's a lot of people that participate from Europe and Australia and places like that. And the way that they experience their life is a little bit different because they have some things like socialized medicine.
Mhm.
They don't have to feel this cutthroat pressure that we
Yeah.
feel in America a lot of the time. And with higher education, like thinking about, I was having discussions with some of my friends in Australia about how their system works with higher education. And they basically have like the government will give you a loan for everybody the same amount of money, and they'll take a small percentage out of your check eventually. Sometimes they won't take it if you're not making enough money. And I was like, oh wow, that must be nice. They don't even think about it because
Yeah.
my daughter is about to be a college student, and
Oh,
which is blowing my mind. That's another
wow.
a whole another experience. I mean, I think that's another thing that's been just, man, being a parent really is a test. I think of it's an endurance test, but it's also a blessing as well. But my daughter, in our household, we had been talking a lot about getting a scholarship and working very hard to get a scholarship. And but the fact that there she and to full disclosure, she ended up getting a scholarship. My daughter just recently got a full ride scholarship to her college of choice, which is
Wow.
extremely fortunate.
Congratulations.
I'm kind of in shock right now about it. Um, but it also brought up some feelings of she was one of 20 people at this school that basically won the college Hunger Games, you know, where she's one of 20 people that won't graduate as a debt slave. And that system that
Mhm.
needs to change, right? That's part of where we say like, that's some of the pressure that we feel in America
Mhm.
that that makes us feel that we need to keep going and
Mhm.
keep grinding, and we can never let ourselves rest, or we're going to become
Mhm.
these debt slaves, or we're going to, if we have one medical emergency, we might, you know, be completely you know, drowning in medical debt. So I think that, you and I have talked about how we can create a more fair and equitable society as well. And I'm sure that resonates with our Aquarius, placements here. Um, but I think that that's important. And I think that I've been thinking about why we feel the need to just keep going and we don't allow ourselves to rest. And it's because there is a very individualistic
Mhm.
um, attitude in this country. And I think honestly, a great lack of communal responsibility for one another. And I hope that we can come back into a balance with that,
Mhm.
an equilibrium where we do respect uh, the need of the community while also respecting individual sovereignty and consciousness. I mean, I think it's both, right?
Yeah.
I think balance is something that I really aspire towards.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I've also been meditating on Aquarius energy a lot, obviously, because I have two big placements there. And I feel that going back to what you were saying about helping somebody find the truth of who they are is so integral for our collective liberation, because when you know who you are and why you're here, you contribute to the collective. And
Yeah.
each of us, when we shine that light that we have, we reflect back to each other, and we remind each other why we're here, why we're doing this in the first place. And it's going to take that like collective mindset to change to a towards a better future. But because I
Yeah.
feel we've all been indoctrinated into a system of individuality and toxic capitalism, it's like
Yeah.
every man for themselves. And something you said about the debt really like it really reverberated at my base chakra, because that's like very debt and a feeling of safety, I think, is where we're being moved towards, right? With the North Node and the South Node right now, in those areas where um, I think we have to also collectively look at wealth and poverty and sharing of resources. And yeah, there's so many things coming to my mind right now. The tabs are all open. So
Yeah.
but those are the things that I felt like I know what I'm doing. I know, like, again, bringing up that word like self actualization, I know why I'm here. I know I'm meant to help people too. So, in that way, I'm doing my part.
Yeah. Well, and that's important. I mean, being able to contribute positively to the collective is huge. I mean, this is something I've conversations I've had with my daughter. I mean, I still have student loan debt, so I understood what that felt like coming out of school and some of the challenges of um, being a 40-year-old person who doesn't own a home, who is still paying off debt and like things like that, and how a lot of people in this country are struggling with that right now. And my daughter she's also an artist and does music and stuff as well, but we've always had talks about how can you be of service to your community, and what are you going to do with this extraordinarily fortunate uh, gift that you've been given from this school. And make no mistake, she worked very, very hard to do that. There was a lot of sacrifice that went into that, but she's also very fortunate. Um, but she wants to be a librarian. She loves to read. She wants to
Amazing.
help keep information accessible
Yeah.
to to the uh, to the masses,
Hmm.
and she's very passionate about making sure that people have accessibility to books. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but they've started banning books left and right
Yes.
again. So I told her, I'm like,
Weird.
she's got Aries Mars and a Capricorn Sun. I'm like, you have to be a fighter. You have to be somebody who stands up for accessibility of information. So she's going to go into something like probably nonprofit or public administration,
Hmm.
so that she can understand how to connect people with the resources of the library. Like, there's all sorts of things that people don't understand about libraries, that they actually help people find jobs. They're hubs of information to
Hmm.
help people find like healthcare and all of these things.
Yeah.
It's a really important thing to protect in this society.
Hmm.
So, and here's another example. My daughter is a Capricorn Sun, third decan Capricorn, which is associated with the Four of Pentacles. And really, there's a lot of archetypes with that about administrating resources and power. And there are examples of people who have had that sun in the past who have become like Jeff Bezos is an example, who have become really like,
Hoarding.
hoarded. Yes,
Yeah.
but there's also people like Dolly Parton,
Hmm.
Betty White, who did a lot of like philanthropic work.
Hmm.
And one of the things she and I have talked about, and this is what's important for folks out there to understand, is you have two different directions you could choose to go with the archetypes that you've been given. So, when my daughter likes dealing with material resources, she likes, like, when she was 5, she asked for a jar of pennies to count for her birthday, like, I want to count these pennies out, but
Oh my God.
so one of the things I think is interesting is how can we utilize her unique abilities to contribute to the whole in a meaningful and ethical way.
Yes.
So she is somebody who, she doesn't just want to be a librarian. She wants to be someone who will be like writing the grants,
Hmm.
advertising these programs so that people can um, really get in touch with the resources that they have. And that's something that not everybody in library science always has that kind of skill set.
Hmm.
So she's going to bring some of that business mindset to public service. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we do when we study our mythological narratives. Like one of the stories with Capricorn 3 was King Midas, which everything he touched
Hmm.
would turn to gold, but again, it turned out to be a curse instead of a blessing. And I think that that's the real gift, is how can we utilize our story in the most mm, the highest way possible, right? In
Yeah.
connection with our higher self.
Oh my gosh, your daughter's so lucky to have you as a father. What generation is she? She's not at Z. She's like after
Yeah,
that.
she just turned 18, so whatever generation that is, the
Oh,
Zoom generation, I don't know.
I feel like they are the ones that are going to change the
Yeah,
collective, right? Because they have parents like you who guide them and using their gifts. Like, how lucky is she? That's amazing.
I hope so. And this is,
Yeah.
she's also been talking about maybe getting involved in her local community politics and like, being like a city advisor type of person. And that gives me hope too, because
Yeah.
we do need people who are hopeful and are able to think about communal needs in our governmental systems. It's not that we need to completely just dismantle all the governments. We need structures, but
Mhm.
we need people that are willing to think about the collective and willing to make sacrifices for the good of the whole in those positions of influence. And I hope for her sake that she's able to utilize those gifts in that direction. I think that I just she's doing an internship with our local library right now, and we live in a very diverse community in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and the joy that she expresses from helping people there is worth it. Like she helped get a grant for a teen program that helps give out these teen packs that help encourage teenagers to read. And um, I'm so proud of her and the work that she's put in. And she's had some challenges in her early life too, and has taken those challenges and turned it into empathy for other people. And I think that there's two directions you can go when you have trauma in your life. You
Mhm.
can let it get the best of you and you can take it out on the world, and or you can utilize it as strength, as power, and help people and realize that there's definitely a difficult, we all experience traumas, we all experience difficulties, and how can we utilize our stories to be an example, right? And to help people.
That is so beautiful. Are you a poet?
I used to write songs.
Yeah, that's right. That was just so beautiful the way you said that. And I also love talking to astrologers because like I can show them my chart and they just know me at a very like energetic level and I don't have to explain something. And you just gave so many like stories that I laughed about about myself. Not that they were funny, but again, like the myths that you tell just give more layers into because they're archetypes. So there's a part of us that is within these stories and these archetypes, and it's something that I think about a lot when I'm moving through my life and like specifically the one you told me about Antares and the frog and the scorpion story and I
Yeah,
when I find myself getting on the scorpion like track.
yeah.
I'm like, Laura, there's a time and place for that intensity.
Well, Laura, the other thing is it gives us a sense of belonging, and
Mhm.
not just a belonging to our immediate communities, but a belonging to a sense of history and time, a
Yeah.
timelessness, because human beings have been going through similar challenges for centuries, for millennia. So that story of the scorpion and the frog, where connecting with Antares, which is the heart of the scorpion, because your ascendant degree is right on that fixed star. So we bring in some of that mythology. And for those who aren't familiar with the story, the scorpion and the frog is basically a scorpion comes to a riverbank and uh, there's a frog there, and the scorpion's like, frog, can you give me a ride across the river, right? And frog's like, I don't know, you're a scorpion, your reputation is pretty bad. Like, and scorpion's like, no, 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 it's all good, it's all good. Right, so scorpion hops on the back of the frog, and they're swimming across the river, and in the middle of the river the scorpion stings him, and the frog's like, scorpion, what the hell? Like, we're both gonna die now. And the scorpion's like, it's sorry, it's just in my nature. I'm a scorpion. Like, I can't help it. But that parable helps us to understand, like you were saying, that there are certain times where intensity is appropriate, and other times where it can really be destructive. And learning to harness that intensity that you might have with that ascending degree can really help you in that moment where, you're going to have things that test you, just like everyone does. And by understanding that story in the moment, you're going to be able to say, oh, aha, I
Mhm.
see. Okay, okay, I see you. I
Yeah.
see your life. I see what you're trying to do. I'm going to take a time out. I have to ask myself, is my intensity appropriate in this moment? Or is it something that could get me, even deeper into whatever pain that I'm feeling right now? So yeah, and we all have stories like that. Every single one of us is has a set of archetypal stories that we are all living. Even if we don't realize it, we can live it consciously with the paranoia type of fate, or we can live it through our ananke or through our ignorance.
Mhm.
Either way, we'll still be manifesting.
And I think about that frog all the time. But in the East, it's more of an oral tradition. So I think that's why I resonate so much with mythology and storytelling, because even when I was studying Reiki, a lot of the things weren't written down. We had to like take oral transmissions from our teacher and like kind of like have it transmitted to us. And as an American, I always wanted to like write things down, but really taking things in through story is just another way to like integrate your own experience.
Absolutely. It's so important. And it's something that we're missing a lot of, I think, in modern society. I do think we get it a little bit through like movies and television. I think that there's a lot of modern mythological stories that are transmitted in that way. But we are missing that kind of experience of sitting around a campfire and sharing stories and passing on these wisdom traditions, and also like having these rites of passage. I think that that's something that used to be a real part of our collective human societies, was acknowledging the time of transition between like youth and adulthood or into our elderhood, at various stages, and we've lost that a little bit. And I think that studying astrology and mythology can start reincorporating some of those very fundamental human things back into our lives.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask a personal question. I'm trying to phrase it in a way that's not scorpionic.
Sure.
How do you feel being like a white man these days? Like a white man who holds privilege, obviously. How do you navigate through time now? Do you feel like you have to watch what you say because you feel someone's gonna rip apart what you say or cancel you, or how do you feel received?
Hmm. That's a good question, and that's something worth meditating on for sure. Um, I think that I'm trying to think it through first. This is my retrograde Mercury in Cancer. Uh, I think that we're in an interesting time of transition, and I think that being a cisgendered white heterosexual male definitely brings a position of privilege. And again, I think it's about how can we be open-minded, and feel empathy for those that aren't as privileged as we are. I mean, there's the word that keeps coming up, and I'm still, like I said, I'm still in process of understanding places where I might have a blind spot as well. But the word that keeps coming up is intersectionality, right?
Mhm.
Where you can have be privileged in one area of your life and be disadvantaged in another. And I think that concept can help alleviate the defensiveness that a lot of white American straight men have, is understanding that you can be privileged in one area of your life, like through your skin color, but also be disadvantaged, maybe in a different area of your life, maybe if you grew up economically poor or something of that nature. Now, that being said, I also have a partner who is African American, and uh, we talk a lot. And a lot of the lens that I view the world through now is through, is she going to be safe? Is she going to be feel seen and acknowledged, and is it fair for her? And through that love and through that relationship, um, I think it's helped teach me some things that I wouldn't have even had to think about, as far as like, here's examples. Like, as a young person, my dad never had the conversation with me about getting pulled over by the police. There was never, you have to sit up straight, you have to do this, don't do any sudden movements or anything like that. That just wasn't something you had to think about. Whereas in her family, her dad sat her down and had to have that conversation with her and her brother about, what do you do if the police pull you over or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And that's a real different experience, and something that is very important to understand. The same goes for folks. This is what I've been hearing a lot lately, especially in the spiritual community. The story of, I don't really follow the news. I
Oh.
don't pay attention to the news.
Oh.
And here's what I'll say though. I I understand that impulse. I
Mhm.
really do. Like, the news is stressful,
Mhm.
and some of it is designed to create more stress and to destabilize us. But it is a privilege to be able to, like, kind of check out and say, well, I don't have to pay attention to that because it doesn't affect me. Whereas, it is important to be able to stay aware of what's going on in your communities, because there are things that may be like, for example, voting rights right now is an important topic that's coming up in America. How do we protect our the people of color who deserve equal access to the polls, and things of that nature? Like, there's people on different factions of this that talk about, well, what about the people that what that didn't support the identification or something of that nature, like showing an ID. And if you dig a little bit deeper, there's certain communities where people have difficulty even gaining access to an ID. Do you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So it's those type of things are why paying attention to uh, communities that don't necessarily directly affect you is still important.
Mhm.
Because here's the thing, here's really what it boils down to. Nobody's free until we're all free. Like, does that make
Exactly.
sense? Like,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
so I think that as far as my being in this position, it's really important for me to speak up. It's really important for me to practice allyship.
Mhm.
Um, I recently had a guest on my show that uh, had a very different political background than I did. He's a wonderful astrologer and a good friend and a good person.
Mhm.
But he had some things where some of these topics were coming up, and we had to I had to push back a little bit,
Mhm.
and I had to, like, and in a gentle way, not in an accusatory way.
Right. Yeah.
You have to do this kind of thing with love.
Right.
Because if you make people feel less than bad, you're tapping into that part of people that is going to lash out and that's going to shut down. So if you want to be a great ally, if you're in this position, you have to come from a place of love, because at the end of the day, you are talking to another human being who has all these sensitive emotions, and we can get into a long talk about white fragility and things like that as well. But you do have to have compassion, and you're going to get a lot further with people in positions of power through love and respect rather than through demonization.
Mhm.
And but it's important for people like me in this position to be the one that is pushing back, because there is, for whatever reason, for better or for worse, sometimes it has to come from within the community of power to push back rather than from the exiled community. It's both, right?
Yes. Well, that's kind of what I was leading you into, because it is the white folks, white male folks specifically, the people who hold the power to dismantle these systems of oppression. And I was just kind of asking because I'm coming from a place of empathy and compassion. It can't be easy when you're in these situations, when you hear something and you're like, ugh, you don't want to rock the boat, but then at the same time, if you don't say something, that's perpetuating um, the act of like a microaggression or something like that. So I was just kind of curious, especially in the spiritual communities where I see the default mode going to, I don't care about politics. I don't care about, the 3D. We talked about the matrix, right? But
Right.
I really believe it's us engaging in it with the system that we currently have where we're going to be able to change. So I was just sending you like all good love and vibes because it can't be easy.
I mean, I guess what I could say about that is it's also not easy being a person of color in America, you know? So I think that could be the first thing that you could say is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not easy being in a position where maybe you're not, I don't know. I, this is the thing. At the end of the day, um, we're all trying to further humanity.
Mhm.
I hope. I mean, at least I am. And I'm gonna be fine. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the thing. Like, I'm okay with who I am and what I represent, and I'm okay with uh, sharing like this as well. I don't think that uplifting another, faction of society is going to lessen who I am at all. Because as I said, we're only as strong as our community. An individual is only as strong as their community. So
Mhm.
if someone else is being repressed, that is still my own. I don't know. Like, there is a collective suffering that comes from that,
Mhm.
and eventually, this is something that you learn as well in studying Taoism, is when you have something that goes to an extreme, you're planting the seed of its opposite. So, one of the things that's really important is if you have fairness and equality for all, you're keeping an equilibrium, a homeostasis, rather than if someone's accumulating all the power, what you're doing is planting the seed of uprising and rebellion. Do you see what I'm saying? It's one of those things where you have to uh, share power so that you aren't going to eventually be, I don't know, so that there's not this usurpation of power. Although I don't know, it's hard to talk about, and it's it's hard to think about. It's hard to communicate it in a way that hopefully is um, rooted in empathy and fairness, and I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think that, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that it's I feel it's going to be harder and harder for astrologers and spiritual practitioners and even wellness coaches to talk about these systems without talking about our collective wellness, our
Yeah,
collective liberation.
yeah. I think that one of the things I was thinking about as I was speaking is that it's important to, mm, it's easy to be misinterpreted in some of these things too. One criticism could be like, if we try to play it too safe and try to play it too um, balanced or equilibrium, that maybe that's perpetuating the unfair systems as well by being too centrist about things. You see what I'm saying? It's a difficult uh, balance to maintain. um, I think that, mm, I don't know. I think we're in really interesting times right now, and I think that being in a position of influence, I what I care about is my audience feeling a sense of safety. And
Hmm.
if, like, say I have a guest on that makes my audience feel unsafe, and not just my white audience, like just like everybody in the audience, all my international friends, all my people of color, all my LGBTQ friends, if somebody on my show is making them feel unsafe, then that's a problem. And I have to be able to create that safety for my audience. And if someone's feelings are hurt about that, like if a guest's feelings are hurt about that, then that's on them, right? That's sort of the four agreements, right? I saw that.
Yes.
Look,
I
yeah, Don
love
Miguel
that book.
Ruiz, right? It's sort of this kind of like, don't take anything personally, but a lot of times people do take things personally. And I guess what I will say too is there is a systemic problem
Hmm.
that we can maybe even objectively observe without having to completely take every single subjective, thing subjectively, right? I think that a lot of the times what you'll see with the white male hetero community is they'll be confronted with a systemic problem, and then they'll start to get defensive individually.
Hmm.
And that part is really difficult to overcome, because all of us tend to take things personally. I mean, we all tend to see things through the lens of our own experience, and it takes a lot of patience and wisdom to be able to create that more objective perspective
Hmm.
and to see things from someone else's viewpoint. And but that's what I love about my work. I love talking to people from different backgrounds and different countries and different experiences. I mean, I have Venus and Gemini, so I just have a innate
I was gonna ask
curiosity.
you.
Yeah, I have an innate curiosity about different
Yeah,
ways of living, and
yeah.
it's fascinating to me. So to me, it's not a threat. It's like it's just the beauty of diversity, you know.
And that's what I appreciate about you, Spencer, because what you said about the agreements is like collectively the person who has the mic, the person who's sharing information, I would hope that they would share that information from a place of integrity, from a place of for the highest good of all involved. But I feel like because of our for-profit system that we live in capitalism, that that's not always the case. And then the other side of the agreement is the listener, the eyes, the ears that it lands on, that they would have the discernment within them
Mm.
to research, to fact check, or maybe just reject that idea if it doesn't align with their values. But both sides aren't holding up their agreements.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a bigger issue, like you were saying, of like how we have these agreements of communication collectively.
It's just, and I think the real foundation of that is just listening to one another, just
Mhm.
having the conversation. I mean, that's one of the things that you and I talked about in our session was, I was asking you about what was your experience like, being someone who, maybe were you a child of immigrants, right? Was this something that we discussed? And maybe even some of the pressure of that as well, of growing up with, in a place that was maybe potentially foreign, where, all of the sacrifices that your folks had to make to come here, and all of the weight of that responsibility that I think a lot of people who have lived in America for many generations don't feel. That's another privilege, right? Of not feeling that weight. So just coming from that point of listening and being able to hear someone else's story, even if it isn't your own, is a fundamental part of the work that I do, but also just hopefully the work that we are all doing as diviners and counselors and guides. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I have my own flaws and weaknesses and blind spots. But I think what's the most important thing is that we're trying, and we are trying to like understand. And if you can come from that point, I think there's a lot of grace that you can have between people, to allow people to mm, go through their own processes as well. Like my daughter's teaching me all this stuff as well. Like this, the younger generation is really doing some great work with this. Like the school that my daughter goes to is a international baccalaureate high school in our local community, and they're very focused on global perspectives and on hearing these diverse voices. And I think that when we were going through some of the real challenging time periods of the last few years, where we were, seeing the Black Lives Matter movement happening, um, a lot of the education that I got on being an ally was through talking with her, and with her educating me and saying, "Oh, that's something that I should think about, and that's something that I need to, maybe I do have a preconceived notion that I need to change." Um, I think it's just about being flexible in your position and realizing that we're all trying to do the best that we can with the information that we have in that moment. Um, and again, try not to take it too personally, because a lot of these things are bigger than you as an individual, and you never really know what someone is going through as an individual. I think we think we have an idea of what everyone's story is,
Hmm.
but a lot of the time, social media is tricky. Like a lot of people only share one tiny fraction of who they are and what they're experiencing, and much of it is illusion. So we have to realize that we may not be seeing everything that that person is just from their Instagram or their Facebook page, or whatever, um, and then hold space for that.
Spencer, I just had this vision of you sitting in like a circle in the woods at nighttime in front of a bonfire talking to like a bunch of people and having a fire ceremony and sharing stories. And I'm like, Spencer feels like you feel like you're 1,000 years old. Just
Some,
all of this wisdom.
well, sometimes I feel like I'm 1,000 years old, and sometimes I feel like I'm a baby. So I think that it's really interesting, the paradox that comes in with that. You know what I think it is? I think it's when you start studying myth and archetypal languages, you are drawing upon the wisdom of thousands of years, and you're hopefully, we're continuing that lineage and passing that knowledge on. So I think that if I were to give advice to people who are new to this type of thing, become a channel for it.
Mhm,
Like realize that you are a vessel, right? That
mhm,
it's not necessarily you, it is, you are a channel for this wisdom,
mhm.
and you're co-creating with that thousands and thousands of years, and millions and millions and millions of people who have thought similar things. And it took so many amazing synchronicities for you to be here on this planet. You are the accumulation of all of that wisdom and all of those actions and choices. And how much of a miracle is that, right?
Yes,
And it blows my mind sometimes. So,
yes.
and even that statement right there, I think that can bring us to the point of empathy for intersectionality, for everybody that we are dealing with on a daily basis, because every single person that you come across, so much had to go into that person, manifesting on this plane of existence,
Mhm.
and all the journeys, all the survival, all the choices that had to be made. It really is, it's just something to be appreciated, and it's just the appreciation of life itself, right?
Yes. So, the title of this episode I shared with Spencer was Self Actualization Through Astrology, Myth, and the Decans. Do you feel like, and I know this is a very esoteric concept of self actualization, It's a word that was coined by Abraham Maslow, an American psychologist. But do you feel like you've come to a point now where you're living your dharma, where you're living your path?
That's a good question. Sometimes that's hard to know, isn't it? Like it's hard to know if you're really living your path. Um, I hope so. I hope so because I've devoted a lot of time and invested a lot of resources
Mhm.
into this path. Um, there's sometimes a part of me that always that looks back, that's like, oh, well, maybe if I'd done this differently with music or art or something like that, maybe I'd be in a different position. But I really do love the work that I do, and I love hearing stories like you share with me, of how a story that I told you may be helping you in a difficult moment. That to me makes it worthwhile. That to me is what makes me feel really good about this work, is hearing those stories, hearing that feedback, and just seeing people incorporate this, timeless wisdom into their life. And really, I mean, he'll just bring it back to the Decans. I have a number of planets in the third decan of Virgo, which is associated with the Ten of Pentacles.
Mhm.
And there's a fixed star in that decan called Alkes, and it's in a constellation called Crater, which is the sacred cup of Apollo, the Grail, basically. And it's about passing on wisdom. It's
Mhm.
about passing on something for a generation that will live beyond you. And I think that on some level, as a musician, I wanted to pass on art that would live beyond me. I was always attracted to artists that were timeless. But it's the same thing with these stories. And it doesn't have to be about me, it's about the stories, it's about these collective stories. That's what will live on. And if I've done something to pass on those stories and to keep them alive, because that's what keeps stories alive, is telling them. If
Yes.
I've been able to do that over the course of my life, then yes, I think I feel like I've done some good, on this blink of an eye that I was here on this planet. And um, yeah, so yes, I think that there's definitely there's a lot of really, um, I'm just getting emotional thinking about it.
I'm getting
Yeah,
emotional,
it's
and I don't
yeah,
get.
it is. It's powerful, and it's something that it does. At the end of the day, um, there's always some self doubt. I think about your path, even if you've done a lot of this meditation work and spiritual work, but it feels good helping people. And it feels good passing on stories, and hopefully people will benefit from it.
I just wanted to point out that when you started sharing, it was 222, which is like a very synchronistic number. I go by numerology too. Um, and I think that's why I asked you, because I wrote in my email that you really helped me self actualize, because I'm always, and maybe that's like my first decan of Aquarius, I'm always looking back to the past, being like, did I do enough? Like, did I like my mind and thinking about the past always gets in my own way of co-creating with the divine, right?
Mhm.
So I wanted to get a reading from you because I'm turning 40 next month, and you're right, like it was more of a confirmation of what I already knew, which was me just sharing in a way that was that's helping people to self actualize, to help people see that really it's about you and your own truth. And I do that through my podcast. But when you talked about my sun and how it relates to my moon and my Venus and how that would, I guess, manifest in this 3D reality we live in, and how when you said, like, you're doing your moon and sun, and I was like, I got so emotional because I've spent 39 years of my life, and maybe 30 of it consciously, like not really knowing why I'm here, and not
Yeah.
really understanding like why I had all these weird jobs, or why I was in finance, and and then to finally feel like I'm on some kind of path that makes sense to me, it's so liberating. So that is why I felt like I wanted to have you on and I wanted you to share because it's not a feeling you get very often in life. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure. And, you know, being able to find clarity is a real gift. I know the times that I've struggled the most in my own life is when I've felt confused.
Mhm.
And I think that when we, it's almost like we get permission to just be ourselves. I think that
Yes.
that's a beautiful gift and not something that we get a lot in society. We get a lot of influences in modern society about what we should be and what we aren't. That's one of the kind of the fundamental parts of advertising is telling you what you're not, so that you feel like you need to buy this thing
Mhm.
to be whole. And when we can get some validation about who we are and just as we are, without having to be anything specific, man, it is such a valuable resource, and it is something that can bring us to a point of peace. I think that that's the greatest gift that I've gotten from studying astrology, and hopefully what I'm hearing that you're experiencing as well is just being more at peace with yourself and your path.
Yeah, like I'm good.
Yeah.
Me. Was there anything I didn't ask that you would like to share? And obviously, after that, I want you to share your offerings.
Mm, I don't know. We covered a lot of ground here today, and
Yeah, you did.
I
And
think
sorry,
it's
I snuck in a few surprise questions.
that's okay. These are good things to talk about. These are good things to examine, and um, I think that everybody's going to have their own comfort level with those types of topics and um, try to navigate it as gracefully as possible. Um, Hopefully, I was able to express what I really feel about it, which is um, sometimes difficult to do on the spot. But again, it's a if this is what I think is important. Here's one thing that I didn't say that is important. Essence is the key. Form is something that's transitory, right? If you think about essence as being eternal and form as transitory, if you just keep that perspective in mind, it can help you to get in touch with the essence that we're trying to achieve, through the essence of equality, the essence of self-actualization, the essence of justice. If you keep that in mind, the form will come and you'll recognize what forms are helpful towards that essence and which ones are oppressive towards it. And that's just been one of the guiding principles of my life is really, not getting attached to form. And that can be liberating too. So that's why I don't even have to be attached to this form, right? I don't have to be attached to this identity, right? And I think that when we can even try to transcend that while also acknowledging that we are having a physical experience and we do need to take that into account, um, I think we can do a lot of good in the world.
Hmm. That's beautiful. So the reading that I had was 90 minutes. What was it? The reading that I had experienced from you,
Yeah, you had the natal,
the natal chart,
yeah, the natal reading.
the
I've
natal
I've
reading.
I've shifted my offerings a little bit. I have one natal reading that is it's a 2 hour reading now,
Mhm.
because I thought that a lot of the times, that's enough time for us to really get in depth with one another. To hear what I like to do in reading is I want to hear your story. I want to hear how you got to the point that you're at, what experiences brought you there. And, I always ask focus questions for a reading too. So I want to be able to take the time to reflect back and really understand what the client is asking me rather than just sharing from my own, encyclopedic
Mhm.
egoic knowledge, right? Because it's not about me, it's about you.
Mhm.
And how can we make, the client the center, the focal point, and the hero of this story, right? And So I have a natal reading where I examine all of the seven traditional planets and your rising sign, and I talk about the tarot cards associated with it, any fixed star mythology that may be coming into the story,
Oh yes, that was like
right?
so interesting. Yeah, because Spencer brings in the fixed stars, which I was really interested in.
Yeah. And it's something where once you understand what stories are operating behind the scenes in your life, that will help you to make choices as you move forward. So once you understand what's operating beneath the surface, then in the moment you will have the awareness to either resist an impulse or to give into it.
Mhm.
I think that that's where our free will comes in. That's where the pronoia comes in. So I always try to give actionable, grounded, practical advice. I try to create a safe space container for people. I do an I-Ching and a tarot reading in addition to the astrology that we go through. Um, and I also give transit readings as well. I do 3 and 6 month transit readings where if you are looking for what is coming ahead, I do sort of recommend doing a natal reading first, because what we can do is establish a relationship. And what we do is we examine your story that has been operating since you were a young person, that continues to operate cyclically.
Mhm.
So even though we can examine things through a transit reading, similar themes are always going to be coming back around in a different form, right? When we talk about essence versus form, the essence of your chart is always going to be similar, but it's going to come to you in different forms. I think of this, the chart's not just a circle, it's a spiral. So
Mhm.
we're going to spiral out from the center as a young person and revisit these topics. And maybe we get to make a different choice as we gain in wisdom and we gain in experience.
Mhm.
And maybe we'll master that lesson, right? Um, yeah, and I love to teach too. So if people are interested in learning more about any different type of divination that I practice, astrology, tarot, philosophy, ancient wisdom traditions, I love working one-on-one with people as well. And I also have been doing some webinars recently, doing a Decans series that I do once a month. At the time that this airs, will probably be on to Pisces season. So if you're interested in learning more about Pisces, you can check out my webinar series. I also have the ones that you may have missed at a store on my website as well. So um, yeah, and I love teaching. I love reaching out to people through um, my YouTube channel. Also, I have my YouTube is Spencer Michaud Astrology. I do live streams, 3 live streams a month, one for the monthly astrology
Mhm.
and one for the new and the full moon. And I love the conversations that we have. So it's a great community that we've started to build there. It's a very international, diverse crowd.
Yeah.
So stop in, come
Yeah,
visit me.
I actually popped into one of yours recently. I forgot which one it was. I think it was the Aquarius new moon, maybe.
Hmm.
But you do have a very international community, which I really appreciate.
It's awesome.
And they're
That's like
so
a dream.
knowledgeable on astrology.
It's a dream come true for me. I've always wanted to be a citizen of the world and visit all these places and see how other people are living, and just the fact that we can connect in this day and age through these ones and zeros is just it's a marvel to me. And yeah, you're right. There are so many people that come with their own perspective and their own wisdom that we're really sharing knowledge. It's not just come watch me. It's let's exchange, and I love that part of it as well.
Yeah. Spencer, you're a beautiful soul. Thank you so much for being here. I will link everything in the show notes. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. This was a pleasure. Thanks again.